Hello. Today we're going to be learning Likkutei Torah Daf Samach Zayin. We are beginning with an explanation on the Maimer al Kein Yamru, and the words that we're focusing on are the words ir סיחון, which ir סיחון, we're reading the word סיחון, which is spelled with a samach, and would be translated as the city of סיחון. We are instead reading it with a sin, so that we read it as siach or סיחון, which is speech. And so it would be read as the city of speech. And the speech that we're talking about is the speech of prayer. And what we're explaining is that the objective of prayer is to convince God, to create a will that God should have for the things that we're asking for. And ultimately, at the broader sense, it's the request that we feel God's will in our lives, and that all the spiritual worlds also feel an emanation and an experience of God's will. And that is the request that we make when we pray. And there is the possibility of reading this pasuk, ir סיחון, with a samach, right, and reading this as the city of סיחון. And if we're going to read it that way, we are reminding ourselves that there is the negative possibilities to speech as well, that they can be used to say things that are that are forbidden, to speak gossip about another. And when we use our speech in that way, we are subverting and we are bastardizing the purpose of our speech. And ultimately, we're giving up on the broader divine mission that we have, and that's the end of that explanation. Now, the next mimer we're going to be talking about is the first mimer in Parshas Balak. The mimer begins with the words "Mimana afar Ya'akov u'mispar Reva Yisrael," and the word that we're going to pick on is the word Rova, which the pasuk literally translates as "who can count the dirt of Yaakov," and the enumeration of the Reva Yisrael. And so Reva has two translations. Either it means a fourth or four, and the four here is going to refer to the four qualities of a Jew, which is thought, speech, and action. And this is all based on a pasuk that says that which means that for your glory, for your creations, your formations, and even your causations. And these three terms, b'rasav, yitzartiv, and asisiv, are a reference to thought, speech, and action. That thought is a creation. That thoughts seemingly come from nowhere. Just like creation, they come from nothing. Yitzartiv, the formation, is speech, which is the idea of forming speech forming thought into coherent speech. And then it says even your actions, af asisiv, and so asisiv is the actual creation, the things that we make, action, and the af in Hebrew grammar refers to something that is missing from the list, but it's an indicator of something missing from the list that is higher than all those three things. And we're going to explore what that means in a deeper sense. So we first talk about the idea of speech. That when a person speaks, they are revealing that which was hidden in their minds before. And when God speaks, he is expressing his creative energy, and he is allowing that creative energy to take form, become letters and words, to become different creations, and to manifest all of his creative qualities by making different creations. And this is where we get the myriad creations, and we come to an interesting verse that it says that Adam named the creatures, and it's explained in Kabbalah that what he was doing was he was revealing their quality of being divine speech by giving names to them, by giving structure to them, by giving form to them. Now, when it comes to Adam itself, nobody names Adam. Adam, it says that he has no partner, and the word Ezer can be read as a name. Adam has no name. Why does Adam not have a name? Because every other part of creation is speech, which means that even at an intellectual level, meaning even at the higher spiritual level where the creation does not yet exist, it's still separate, it's still distinct, and it only takes coming out, as opposed to man and the soul of a Jew, which comes from machshava, comes from God's thought, which means that in its source, the Jewish soul is one with all other Jewish souls and one with God. And the only way for a Jewish soul to gain independent identity is by that soul coming out and becoming a person with a name. But as soon as the soul is done, it goes back to its source. And this we now can understand a little bit why we are here and what our divine purpose is. That even though this soul had this wonderful experience before of being connected and bonded with God, the soul wants to be down here, where down here it gains individuality, and in gaining individuality, it can begin to serve God, and it can yearn to come back to that state of unity, right? Because the Jewish soul has an inner aspect and an outer aspect. The outer aspect is where we struggle with our temptations and our desires. But the inner aspect, the inner perspective, is the fact that our souls came from God's thought, and so they really are bonded with God. And from that perspective, creation and temptation don't really exist. And so we pray and we work to come back to that point, and not only to come back to the point of our original source, but given that that God has a will behind creation, and that this was the af in the pasuk, this was the hidden thing that's not mentioned. There's thought, speech, and action, and then there's the will. But the will is for creation. The will is for action. The will is fulfilled through action, and so the soul strives down here not just to go back to its source of machshava, of thought, but that the soul works very hard to fulfill God's will and to reach to that higher place of being truly united and bonded with God himself.